It's great to be here. Thank you for your warm welcome here in Sunset West, and to those who are online as well. I just want you to know, well, I want to say first of all greetings from the UK and from the Wilberforce Academy in the UK and the Wilberforce Collective, and from Christian Concern and many friends. The various connections we've made through those who've been to the Academy in the UK, from various people who've been from the UK here to the Academy in South Africa, from Andrea, Jonathan, etc. I want you to know, especially for the benefit of those who aren't here in Somerset West, that being a good Englishman, I did bring a blazer and a tie. Wanted to treat this gathering with respect. There's a technical challenge, because apparently if I wear the blazer, I blend into the background. So those online won't be able to see me. Or I'll be a floating head. So that's the reason that I've put on this slightly more casual top. Kept my tie on, even though it slightly clashes with the top. But maybe this is appropriate. I've rolled up my sleeves because this is really a practical session. It's a workshop session. We're going to come to that a little bit later on, because you're going to be doing much of the work as we think a bit about how the Wilberforce Academy and the community that it's creating might develop in the future. Now, before we get to the bit where you're going to do some work and discussion and perhaps feedback on some of those things, I'm going to spend a few moments just bringing you up to speed, explaining some of the developments and journey that we have been on with the Wilberforce Academy in the UK. But as I say, it's a great pleasure to be here and to continue and to renew these relationships and these connections. It's really encouraging to see people here in the room and others on Zoom, and to be reminded of the impact that the Academy is already having here. And wasn't it great to hear those testimonies and to have that Q&A session, and just to hear a bit about how already the Academy is having a practical impact. And I think one or two people commented on how intense the Academy week is, how much there is in it, how perhaps every session causes people to rethink things and challenges. There's a lot to take on board, there's a lot of notes to go back to perhaps. But I want to say, in many ways, the Academy week, that's the easy bit. It's intense and it can be challenging, but that's the easy bit. Because as those who've, and I know many of us, perhaps not all, but many of us have been to the Academy, but as those who have come to the Academy, or perhaps will, in January and beyond, the call to us is not just for a week of intensive input and discussion and challenge, but for a lifetime of courageous cultural leadership, of courageous, servant-hearted, sacrificial leadership, as we seek to go into culture and to proclaim the Lordship of Jesus Christ, and to seek to see the culture shaped by Jesus, and as we seek to recognise his Lordship over all of life, over our lives personally, over our families' lives, church, and in the culture more widely. And that's one of the things that the challenges that faces us too in the UK, one of the things that we grapple with. I think it was mentioned earlier, the Academy, the first Academy took place in 2010, so a little over a decade ago. And great things have come from the Academy in the Lord's grace, and it is all down to him and his kindness. There's been much fruit, as those who've been on the Academy have been equipped and encouraged and held accountable by one another to seek to live faithfully for Jesus and fruitfully for Jesus in the places where God has placed them, in vocational fields or other areas of society. And we praise God for what he has done and continues to do. But as we've been on that journey, for us as an organisation, the Academy has been a starting point, and the community around it has continued to grow. And pretty much right from the beginning, that is how we encouraged those who came to the Academy to think of it. The Wilberforce Academy is a beginning, not an end. The week is a starting point, not a finishing post. It's an entry point. It's a front door. It's a front door into a community that is committed to the goodness and recognising the Lordship of Jesus, and seeking to bring the news of that lordship to the culture, to see every area of culture shaped by the goodness and the power of the rule of Jesus. So, a community that wants to see society renewed by Jesus. A community of people who are committed to working together, collaborating in community to bring the hope of Jesus to the very heart of society at every level. That's our vision. And so, over time, that has been something of the journey. But increasingly we want to focus attention and help people to understand that what we're really about is that community of people who will be, in God's grace, under Jesus, culture changers for Jesus. And the Academy is just a front door. It's an important front door, a vital front door, but it's a front door. And so our focus shifts to what we're calling the Wilberforce Collective, a community of like-hearted and like-minded people who want to see society renewed by Jesus. Now I should just, for context, just highlight that for us, the Wilberforce Academy and the Wilberforce Collective is primarily focused on young adults. So the 18 to 30, typically, or just over 30 age bracket. Because originally when we created the Academy, the focus was creating something for students and young professionals, those who were studying or were in the process of going into different vocational fields. I recognise that here it's a little bit different at the moment. I hope that many of these things will still be appropriate. For us, it's because we've got other programmes or other ways of engaging with some of the other groupings amongst our supporter base. But we keep that under review all the time. So, let me talk a little bit then, if I may, before we go into some group discussion and feedback and Q&A about the Wilberforce Collective, as our increasing focus is on that, and then understanding the place that the Academy has in that mix. So come with me on a journey for a moment or two, if you will. You're in a relatively unfamiliar part of town for you. Haven't been there for some time. And you're walking, perhaps here you're driving, and you turn around a corner and you see a building that you don't really recognise, you haven't really noticed it before. It's a big building. It's set back from the road. It's a very impressively designed building. It's beautiful. It's large. Has some beautiful gardens. You can tell that there's a lot of activity going on inside the building. You can hear something of the buzz and the excitement. And you can see that the door, and it's very impressive, big front door up some steps, is slightly ajar. So, let's imagine curiosity gets the better of you. You feel emboldened, and you think, I'll just wander up and find out what kind of place this is. What is this building? Is it a museum? Is it a factory? Is it an office? Is it some kind of shopping centre? What is it? So you wander up the pathway, through the beautiful gardens, up the steps to the front door. The door is slightly ajar. You push it open. In you go. And there before you is a huge entrance hall, a big hall, with a cathedral ceiling. It's, again, beautifully designed. Lots of natural light, colour, well crafted. But there's no one in there. No one in this big hall. But still you can hear the noise, you can hear the energy, you can hear the buzz. And you notice that off this hall, there are various other doors, smaller rooms. So you think, well, that's where the people are. But I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out what's going on here. So you go wandering to the first room that you choose. Again, the door's slightly ajar. You nudge it open. And this is a very formal room. It's oak panelled, lots of books, lovely wooden furniture. And there around a big classical desk in the middle of the room, a big classical table, there are some serious-minded looking people talking, discussing, debating. Very intense, quite almost heated at points, lots of opinions being shared. Who are these people? Well, it turns out they're lawyers. Here's a group of lawyers, and what are they discussing? They're discussing the government's, I'm going to use this in a UK context, you can do the cultural translation, but they're discussing the government's latest consultation on the possibility of prison reform. And they're asking the question, what does God say prisons are for? What does the Bible say that prisons are for? Are prisons a good thing or a bad thing? Should there even be prisons? If so, what's a good prison? What makes for a good prison? What makes for a bad prison? How might things be changed? What is God's purpose? How do we understand criminal justice from a biblical point of view? And then how can we translate that and respond to this government consultation in a meaningful and constructive way? Well, it's getting a bit heated, bit intense in there. So you've had enough. It can be too much. It can be quite easy to quite quickly have enough with your lawyers, unless you're a lawyer. So you slip out and you go next door to the next room. Again, you put your head around the door. This couldn't be a more different room. I mean, this room might be described as a little bit chaotic. Some would say creative. Certainly a lot more colourful. There are musical instruments around the place. There's art on the walls. There are lots of cool things. Who do we have here? We have the creatives. We have those who are creative and involved in creative industries. They're as much eagerly in conversation and in discussion. They're talking about story. They're talking about what is the place of story? How does God use story? What does he use it for? How does he tell stories? What are the elements of a good story? And then they're asking the question, how can we take that? How can we use that? Perhaps in the digital world, to bring the good news of Jesus into a digital environment. Or to talk about how to make real the realities of perhaps abortion and the dignity of every human person. It's a very different type of conversation. It's sometimes busy and noisy, sometimes it's a bit more reflective, sometimes there are long periods of silence as people think and digest, and then a burst of energy. Well, enough in the creative room. You slip out of there, again unnoticed, you go next door. Wow, again, a different type of room, bright lights, very bright white light, lots of whiteboards up on the wall, whiteboard markers around the place, people sat in a slightly different way, a bit more like this. Certainly here in Somerset West, I don't know how you're sitting online in other places, but here it's a bit more of a classroom setup. Yes, these are the educators with their whiteboards and whiteboard markers, and they're thinking about what is education for, according to the Bible. What does God say education is, rather than just what we've assumed from our academic training or what we've seen in the places where we've grown up. Education, so is education about the accumulation of information and knowledge? Is it about the application of knowledge? Is it about virtue? Is it about growth in character? What is education in biblical terms? And how does that shape how we as educators go about the role that we have? And then someone says, well, yeah, let's make this practical though. Could we, just this group, could we start a Christian school? And then someone else chimes in and says, no, let me trump that. How about we start a Christian university? What would that involve? What would that look like? Well, that's getting a bit big for you, so you slip out of that room and you go next door. Here's a room that looks very slick. Very slick. There are some big screens. There are a lot of tablets. There are a lot of people writing with stylus, pens on their tablets, handwriting recognition, all there. Some very slickly dressed people. The conversation's quite brief, crisp, precise, brisk. Here's a group of business owners, and they're talking about what is the purpose of business ownership in kingdom terms. They're talking about developing a charter of Christian values for business that they can implement practically in their businesses. They're taking things that they've learned on the Wilberforce Academy in terms of a theology of work that recognises both the dignity of work but also the temptation towards idolatry and dehumanisation. And they're thinking practically, how can we embed that in a set of values that we can then put into our businesses as young Christian business owners? Out you go from that room into the next. Lots of screens in this room too. Lots of screens, but no light. This room is basically almost dark. And on the screens are flashing up lots of things that are pretty much incomprehensible to the vast majority of us. It's the software engineers, you guessed it. It's the software engineers. There they are, but they're also away from their screens, and they're in discussion. And they're in discussion about in light of a big picture that's up on one of their screens, of a big tree, and lots of plants. And what they're thinking about and asking is, how does God code? How does God use code to create? How does God use code and code snippets in trees and plants, code that can adapt in the situation it's placed into, code that can replicate itself, taking a lead from patterns that God has set in his created order. Is there anything here that we can take as a lead for how we approach coding that might make coding more efficient or more effective? They're asking those kind of questions. Remarkable. Well, it's all getting a bit much for you now. There's so many different things buzzing in your head. You slip out of that room. You're about to go into another room on the ground floor, but then you hear this noise upstairs. So you think, okay, haven't got too long, so I'm going to go upstairs. You go up the big grand staircase. Remember, it's a cathedral ceiling, so there's a balcony on the next floor up. But then again, there are lots of rooms off the balcony. So you slip into the first one. Wow. Okay, so here you've got another group. Here you've got a group of people thinking about how we can use digital media specifically to try to help people in the public domain recognise the dignity of every human person. So, here we've got Noah, the copywriter. We've got Diana, the project manager. We've got Brendan, the doctor, giving a medical perspective on issues related to life. We've got Benny, the lawyer, giving a legal perspective. We've got other creatives and animators in the room, and they're embedded in this question of how we can use digital media and digital storytelling in this particular project. You slip out of that room and into the room next door. Here's another group of Wilberforce Academy alumni. This time, they're asking the question, how can we use new and emerging technologies that are used in immersive experiences, immersive events, to help tell the story about Jesus and help people to encounter him in a new way, particularly around the message of Christmas, the Christmas story. How can we embed them? We've got Storm, the poet and spoken word artist. We've got Dorcas, the scriptwriter. We've got Kat, the artist. We've got Noah, another Noah, a photographer. We do actually have another Noah. Remarkable. We had two Noahs on our academy this year. Noah, the photographer. We've got animators. We've got software engineers who are experienced in coding for animation. Thinking about, we've got Jake, the product designer. We've got Jake, another Jake, the architect, who might be able to create a set. So between them, we have the skills to design an experience with script, with engaging content, with graphics, art, animation, and even a three-dimensional physical set that next Christmas, in the run-up to next Christmas, Christmas 2024, could be an experience that we can have public invitations to, inviting people to come in and to experience the Christmas story in a new way, and to bring the hope of Jesus to them in a novel way, experimenting, developing, using emerging immersive technologies that we can build on in the future. Wow, very different. But then the clock strikes, the big clock that you had half noticed as you came in to the big room, the big building downstairs. A beautiful clock, and it chimes. And at that moment, everyone drops what they're doing and comes downstairs. And they fill that big entrance hall, the big hall right in the middle of the building that you wondered what it was for. And they praise God together. And then they're encouraged from the scriptures for a few moments in their labours. They pray. They recognise God's lordship, the lordship of Jesus. They recognise God's hand in all that they're doing. They seek his favour. And then they feast and eat together and connect and enjoy the relationships. But not for long, because then the clock strikes again. That's lunch, finished. And at that point, there's a sudden dispersal. And all these people leave the building. They rush out. Not back home, not at the end of the day, but into the various institutions, the schools, the businesses, the healthcare practices where they've been, and go back into the different institutions and vocational callings that God has placed them in. What is this place? What is this building? Is it a workshop? Is it a hub? Is it a factory? Well, it's all of those things. This is a factory for cultural renewal. This is a factory for Christ-shaped cultural renewal. This is a workshop, working things out together, improving, developing. This is a hub. This is a community hub for Christians to come together in collaboration and creativity to shape all of culture for Christ Jesus. What is this building? This is the home of the Wilberforce Collective. This is the vision for what the collective is. As we bring people through the front door of the Academy into a community that will continue to engage with one another, to connect, to continue to be cultivated in faith and gifts and passion and desire, to an understanding, and who will collaborate creatively and with courage to bring the hope of Jesus to the heart of society. So that is, if you like, a word picture of the Wilberforce Collective and our vision for it. Let me in a few moments just highlight then a bit more practically what that means in practice. So the Wilberforce Collective, called by Christ to go into all of culture. And so the Wilberforce Collective is a community of young adults, so just remember the context, this is in the UK, this is our focus, is a community of young adults who want to see society transformed by Jesus in bold, biblical and beautiful ways. Coming together in order to encourage, work together, collaborate, in order then to go out and to shape culture. Three things, or three aspects, and this is all a work in progress as we continue to develop it, and we develop it with those who are in the community, those who are in the collective. It's not, and some of this I think is Ryan's highlighting to me is laid out in some of the cards I think on the seat. But three things that we'll chat about. But the call is called by Christ to go into all of culture. The appeal is, particularly in our context for young Christian adults, to use your gifts for something greater. To use your gifts in a lifetime of service. I'm reminded, I think, of how Jonathan, if you were there at the Academy in January, the last session, I think he closed from Josiah with these words. Hopefully you've already got a copy of the book if you're here. Now the rest of the acts of Josiah and his good deeds according to what is written in the law of the Lord and his acts, first and last, behold, they are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. And Jonathan said and writes, the book of the kings of Israel and Judah records how Josiah was remembered, his courage, his commitment, his heart. As we take our lead of Josiah, we're called to reflect on where we are regarding our own courage, our own commitment, and our own hearts. How do you want to be remembered? What's going to be written in your book? And we're praying that the collective will be part of the good answer for many of those who come through the Academy as to how they want to be remembered, an opportunity for them to be remembered for using their gifts for something greater. Three elements. The collective is an opportunity to connect with a community that wants to see the justice, truth and hope of Jesus at the heart of society. Second, to cultivate your thinking, gifts and passion to proclaim the Lordship of Christ wherever he has placed you. So continuing to grow, develop and be trained. And three, collaborate with others to shape and see society renewed for the good of all. So three elements: connecting, cultivating, collaborating. Let me touch on those very briefly. Connecting. I think we've heard it here this morning. I think Heinz mentioned it, perhaps others did too. One of the striking things about being at the Academy is the reminder that we're not alone. How easy it is to feel, if we're concerned about some of the issues that we talk about in the Academy, if we're concerned to see the culture shaped more by Jesus, how easy it is to feel isolated and alone. How easy it is to feel that there are not many others to talk about. And certainly in the UK context, I am struck by how often I hear from those who come. It's wonderful to feel like I have a home. I feel as though I've got a home here. I've got a home where I can talk to others at a similar age and stage of life. We can talk about some of these issues. We can hear and work out what God has to say about them. We can encourage one another. We can challenge one another. We can hold one another accountable. We want to do that in a way that builds and encourages local churches. It's not a substitute for local churches, but to connect more widely. And this is a community that is marked, we pray, by compassion. We're motivated by love for God, first of all, love for Jesus, but love for neighbour. We passionately believe that God's good pattern is good for human flourishing, and that to speak of his pattern for life and to seek to reflect that is not oppressive, it's for good, it's loving. So we're marked by compassion, motivated by compassion. We're marked by clarity, because we understand the times and we understand the issues, and we want to speak clearly on them and live in light of them. This has been remarked on already this morning. Marked by courage. One of the great calls of the hour. Courage. Who will stand in the strength of the Lord? Be not afraid. Be courageous. And by creativity. Finding new ways and creative ways to bring the truth about Jesus and everything that flows from him into our society. And we've got so many stories already from within the Academy community, within the collective, of how the Academy has helped people to take a stand in their workplace. Sometimes that's resulted in people losing their jobs. Sometimes it's resulted in quite significant change in their workplace. And we heard stories of that at this year's Academy. But we must move on. Second, the collective is an opportunity to cultivate your thinking, gifts and passion to proclaim the Lordship of Christ wherever he has placed you. The Academy, as we said, is just the beginning. It's the front door. And it's a front door into ongoing training, encouragement, development. There are an increasing number of elements of this for us. A menu, as it were. Refocus days, we have two, are one of those. The cultural leadership program, I'm going to speak on in just a moment or two. We have prayer meetings, monthly prayer meetings, usually by Zoom or equivalent, for the collective community. We have book clubs. There have been some book clubs that have worked through Jonathan Burnside's God, Justice and Society, other books as well. Some of our vocational groups have started mentoring schemes, where some of those who are a bit older and further on in their vocational service have been paired up with those who are still students as an opportunity to connect with them through the year and encourage them. We've run seminars and options of seminars, both across the whole collective, but then also within some of the vocational groups, and that's something that's really growing this year as the different vocational groups have taken more ownership for how they're going to run events and connect within themselves, as it were, during the year. We've created some internships as well at Christian Concern for those who've been through the Academy. That's a thing that we've rebooted this year. But certainly a big emphasis on wanting to continue to learn, develop, train one another. I mentioned there the Cultural Leadership Programme, and this we run once a year, and it takes place over a number of Saturdays as it happens with teaching, but there's then coursework to do as part of it. It's led by Dr. Dan Strange and by Jen Charteris, who are both part of Crossland's training, which is a partner of Christian Concern. Dan is involved in the Wilberforce Academy. If you were here at the first Refocus Day of the year, I think you would know that you would have come across Dan. And this Cultural Leadership Programme gives you opportunity to go deeper into some of the things that I think he presented there, and to really try to embed those and practically, both as individual coursework but also coming together as a group. And this is open to South African delegates of the Academy. There's going to be a particular way that you could come and connect with that and be part of it. I think Ryan will speak of that later. So connect with a community, find a home that's going to help you to be courageous, clear, compassionate and creative. 2, continue to cultivate, continue to grow. 3rd, collaborate. This is some of the top floor aspect of what we were talking in the home of the Wilberforce Collective house. Collaborate with others to shape culture for Jesus and see society renewed for the good of all. And here are all sorts of different ways that we're encouraging people to collaborate, and they are already. So in the area of cultural ideas, in the area of cultural institutions, in the area of cultural products and artefacts, a bit like the book, a bit like those short films, a bit like the new posters that were being suggested by that group, and then in cultural campaigns and initiatives. Those would be 4 areas that we're already encouraging and seeing Wilberforce Collective members come together multi-vocationally across disciplines, using different gifts and experience to come together to produce and to shape and to be on the front foot and to lead. to lead for the sake of the church and to lead for the sake of the culture. So just briefly, by way of example, cultural idea is we've got a redeeming research group of collective members who are in academia and are sharing resources and ideas. So these are those in their 20s, early 30s, sharing challenges that they face in academia, sharing resources, thinking about some of the challenges of being in the academic world. Maybe the challenge of critical theory, maybe other aspects, but also sharing practically resources as well as prayer requests. We've got a group at the moment that's come together to look at a biblical theology of food, because a number of the collective members, one was a baker, another worked in the coffee industry, thinking, what does the Bible actually say about food and its purpose and plan, and how can we use that to shape our vocational understanding? How can we share that with the church more widely? Cultural institutions, we've got schools that have been started by people who came on the academy, who are part of the Wilberforce Collective, and caught the vision there and have started new Christian schools. Cultural products and artefacts, we've got things like the book Ted the Bear that we hope to get published properly. We've got short video material. We've got some of those posters, for example. At the moment, there's a group, a very cross-vocational group, working exactly on that immersive event for next year, with creating that kind of event, using it both as an opportunity in itself, but also as an opportunity to experiment with new immersive technologies and experiences to see how Christians can not lag behind in that, or just react to what's happening, but how we can be at the forefront, how we can help churches in the future think about these technologies and their proper place, how they can be used, how we can not be captured or captivated by them, but how we can use them. So there's a double benefit of being engaged in that kind of collaboration. Cultural campaigns and initiatives, we've got people working on ways to challenge abortion, to speak about the dignity of every human person. We've got people who, from the collective, who are involved in thinking about the threatened conversion therapy law to ban so-called conversion therapy in the UK. So lots of different ways that people are employed, not just in their vocational groupings, but also in their collaboration groupings. And these are just a few of the questions that we just threw up at the Academy this year, just to kind of get people started, partly on the basis of some of the conversations that we had at this year's Academy amongst the delegates. And you'll see they're all sorts, they're all across the spectrum. But how can we use children's storybooks or teen fiction to highlight every person is created in God's image and precious in his sight? How do we start a Christian school? What are the cultural drivers of abortion? Who could do some research and analysis on that? What are the pressures that lead people to choosing? What can we do in response? What does the Bible say about prisons? How can we use new media to tell a better story about marriage and sex and family in God's purpose? What do creation and scripture teach us about building good cyber security? Why just think that the contemporary software industry has all the best answers? What might looking at God's creation and the way that God creates teach us about that? How can we use technology of immersive experience to introduce people to Jesus? What does the Bible have to say about designing a house? What do modern houses say about what's most important to family life? This is partly off the back of, we've got some people in the Academy who've been really struck, or in the collective, who've been really struck by the Academy, having to think about the whole of life, including their vocational field, with a Christian from a biblical perspective. Wow. And a lot of people actually in design and tech, they've never had that challenge to think about, how does God design? How does God do technology? Like, how does that shape? And it's revolutionary for them. And one of our collective has written a book called God's Sketchbook. And his key question is, how does God do what I do? How does God do what I do? And he's set up a product design business, and his book is explaining about how his understanding from general revelation, from creation, about how God does stuff, and from the scriptures about why God does stuff, what the purpose of creating things is, taking those two things together and applying that to his vocational field of design. And so he starts to challenge. He comes back to the Academy, he does a seminar, he challenges those in design and tech and thinks, let's take a house. Why do we just assume that we know how to build it, what a house is for, or what shape it should be? Yeah. Let's think about What is important to God in family life or in extended family life? Well, you just think about nuclear family, like it could be bigger, about community, about bringing people in. What are the priorities in family life? How do we shape? Because the architecture, the buildings in which we live, they shape us. They disciple us. So how do we reinforce what God says is a priority? So both thinking about how God does stuff, but why God does stuff, and applying that to different vocational fields.